All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. A lot of news, a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement. Of course, Dallas Cowboys super active at the trade deadline, sending massive shockwaves across the NFL world. We'll get into all the details and some interesting news around that, some specifics as the fallout continues. But let's get started, as we always do on this channel, with a little stat of the day, a little palate cleanser, if you will. And I'm going to pull up a graphic I put together, just a little chart looking at the Cowboys cap projection, because obviously with the addition of Logan Wilson and Quinnen Williams, it changes the math a little bit for the Cowboys' long-term cap projects. And right, I want to keep in mind here the Cowboys are focused on 26 and 27. We'll get into why people who think this is somehow a short-term move are out of their freaking minds. But let's talk about the Cowboys cap projection here. So the way it's currently situated, and this is based on some estimations I did and data from overthecap.com. So it's a little rough in terms of the raw numbers, but this is just sort of a ballpark. So use this as a ballpark, don't hold me to this as if it's gospel truth, okay? So starting with in the offseason, the way it's sitting right now, I'm projecting the Cowboys to have about $15 million over the cap, right? $30 million added into their favor with the Prescott restructure. They have a June 1st release of Terrence Steele, a June 1st release of Trayvon Diggs. They give George Pickens the franchise tag, and that leaves them with about $15 million-ish left over in free cap space to make a few moves here and there, right? Obviously, to probably add a veteran depth piece on the offensive line to replace Terrence Steele. Nathan Thomas would probably be the starter long term, but you want to add maybe a veteran swing tackle, maybe a few other places across the roster. And listen, that George Pickens number, that could be a lot lower if they extend him to a long-term deal, right? There's a lot of things that could happen here, of course. But the reality is, even with Quinnen Williams, even with Logan Wilson, they still are in a pretty solid cap situation. Prescott's going to get his restructure as he should, right? Listen, as much as he's not played great the past couple of games, he certainly has earned it this season with how he has played in terms of adding some dollars. Again, the restructure is basically taking his salary and converting it into a signing bonus and making it spread out over future cap years, basically lowering cap space now to kind of spread out that cap hit over the duration of the contract. I think it makes sense. Prescott, at least at this point, we'll see how the season ends up, shows no signs of immediate slowing down, is working well with Adams and with Shoddy, working well with Lamb, Pickens, Ferguson, all those guys. So he seems to be doing fine on offense. No concerns there, so a restructure makes sense. The June 1st release of Terrence Steele and Trayvon Diggs both make sense right now. We'll see what happens the rest of the way, of course. But based on that, the Cowboys are still in a good cap situation. And that's one of the things, one of the concerns I had, or I should say one of the criteria I had going into the trade deadline was make moves that don't mortgage your future. And even after adding Quinnen Williams, even after adding Logan Wilson, two guys who are both under contract through 2027, the Cowboys are going to head into the 2026 offseason with a lot of options on their plate to make a lot of big moves. There's no real risk in terms of retaining a guy like Pickens. It seems like they're in a good position to do that. They're in a good position to obviously open up some cap space for some other moves potentially with the Steele and Diggs release, and then you can replace Terrence Steele with the veteran. Nathan Thomas is your starter. And the cornerback position, listen, this is going to come down to, does Revel look good, right? Do they like what he brings to the fold? Reddy Stewart, does he seem to be like a competent nickel going forward? It's one of those things, right, where a lot of it's going to hinge on how some of these young guys play the second half of 2025. But if you look at the numbers, they're still in a good spot in terms of cap space, which obviously is really important. All right, let's get into the news. I'm going to highlight this because it's been on the top of a lot of people's minds. This is courtesy of Calvin Watkins. He posted, Brian Schottenheimer said the Cowboys' five-man front will be used more in the future. They used a lot of five-man front against the Arizona Cardinals Monday night. He said Osa played his best game of the year last night because of the five-man fronts. It seems like the Cowboys are transitioning, to a more five-man front, not as their base, but certainly as one of their primary looks. I think it's a smart move. Obviously, the addition of Quinnen Williams kind of accelerates that path, and I think it's a good idea, right? You can still be a zone-based team defense, which I'm in favor of, generally speaking. Obviously, you can't be 100% zone. You got to mix it up somewhat. But I'm in favor of an odd front. I've always been a fan of it, going back to when Bill Parcells transitioned the Cowboys to it in 2005. I think it creates more chaos. I think it allows you a lot of opportunity to confuse the offensive line with slants and blitz looks and things like that. One of the things as a former offensive lineman I always hated was when you get to the line of scrimmage and you have no idea what the defense is doing, right? They could be slanting, they could be stunting, they could be blitzing, right? The one thing I always loved as an offensive lineman, even if you're going up against a good player, is if you've got a defensive player and he's in a gap right in front of you and you're like, okay, I know he has that gap. I know he's going to stay there. And even if he doesn't stay there, if he slants, the only other place he can go is this gap, right? So you know so much already going into the situation. A 3-4, you have no idea, because obviously you've got a nose tackle, the 2-4 eyes on the inside eye of the outside tackles. You've got all the linebackers, which for Dallas will be stand-up defensive end. So Ezra Rocket would be an outside linebacker defensive end. So would Clowney. So would James Houston. So would, Sam Williams, Fowler, and your inside linebackers would be Wilson and Overshown in that 5-man front, that 3-4 kind of look, right? Depending on what they come up with structure-wise. I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Now, again, do they have the personnel today to go to a full old school 3-4? Probably not, but I think mixing it in key situations is really good, really important. And I think that's a big part of this trade for Quinnen Williams, was adding that sort of element to this Cowboys defense while also still playing that 4-3 and rotating in Clark, Williams, Osa Odighizuwa, and allowing them to wreak havoc from that perspective as well. And again, just making their defense more challenging to game plan for, at least in the front seven. And I think that's what the Cowboys should do. I think it worked actually pretty well, Monday night. I know a lot of the people were very disappointed with Dallas's defense, as they should, but the defensive line dominated. The defensive line had a really good game. The success that the Cardinals had running the football was primarily on the edges, right? They averaged, I think, less than 3 yards per carry, or right around that, running in between the tackles. When it was all said and done, they averaged, over 5.5, over 6 yards per carry, I believe, on the edges. So again, that has nothing to do with the defensive tackle play, the way the 5-man front stopped it. It has more to do with linebacker and safety play, and defensive end play too, from that perspective. So I think, again, going to the 5-man front, the odd front more makes sense to me. And I'm glad Schottenheimer, again, as much as we, Schottenheimer has done for the offense, and I think generally he's done good things, although I've been critical of the way the team has played, as we all have the past couple weeks. And a big part of the blame does fall on the head coach, as it should. The changes he spearheaded and led and forced are really good to see. I mean, you look at a lot of teams in the NFL. I'll look at the Cincinnati Bengals, for example, because they're sort of very similar to Dallas. Good offensive talent. Of the defensive issues, right? Not a lot of no championships in Cincinnati forever. No championships in 30 some odd years for Dallas, right? It's coming to, very similar franchises. They have talent, right? It's, they're playing second fiddle to top teams in their division. With the Bengals, it's the Ravens. With Dallas, it's Philadelphia recently, right? So it's one of those things that are very similar in their situations. Both have quarterbacks that are good quarterbacks that have, dealt with some injuries, but are being paid a lot of money, but are really good, smart quarterbacks, right? Very similar teams. Both teams have good wide receivers. Long story short, Zach Taylor, what he does with their situations going back a couple of years, the head coach in Cincinnati, he's just like, hey, I like what we're doing. We're not going to change anything, right? I trust our guys to figure it out, which is a move to certainly to make as the head coach. Whereas Shoddy is like, hey, we're going to make changes. And he's made changes every single step of the way this season, which guarantee you he had a hand in these trades, right? I'm not saying he was the guy that pulled the trigger, but I guarantee you him and his coaching staff, they were involved in some capacity and said, do you want this guy? Do you not want this guy? And I think Shoddy's like, yeah, let's get him. Right? I mean, he talked about it going into Monday Night Football. 1 game season for a lot of people, and it looks just like a lot of people may have played their last significant reps for Dallas as a starter, at least a planned starter, after this move, which, again, that's what Shoddy's doing. He's forcing changes, and I'm here for it. All right, this next post is from me, the SMI Cowboys Show X account, so give it a follow if you haven't already. I really appreciate it. Listen, this is an honest evaluation of Jerry turned an all-pro defender, Micah Parsons, and a second-round pick into an all-pro defender, that's Quinnen Williams, a solid defender in Kenny Clark, and a first-round pick. This is just, you look at those numbers and just think about that honestly, just looking at that from that perspective. Obviously, this is a huge win for Dallas, the Parsons trade and Jerry Jones. We'll talk about some of the media reaction a little bit later, but I'm just absolutely astounded for people that don't see this as, at the very least, you can sit there and say, yeah, it's kind of a fair deal. We'll see how it works out. And I think part of it is the positions, right? People look at defensive tackles and they're like, oh, come on. It's not a wide receiver. It's not a defensive end. It's not a sexy, glamorous position, right? The reality is you need good football players at every level of the defense, right? You need good football players everywhere. The Cowboys have been so bad at defensive tackle going back years, and now they've turned it into a legitimate strength, which let's give credit to the Cowboys front offense for getting that done, right? And they did it, by the way, not with 1-year rentals. Kenny Clark under contract for multiple years. Osa Odighizuwa, multiple years. Quinnen Williams, multiple years, right? You're starting to see this team come together for a multiple-year run, right? It wasn't like they got a 1-year rental on a guy at the end of his career and they're really trying to maybe turn the season around. No, this was a move, the Quinnen Williams trade and Logan Wilson trade too, for 2026 and 2027. They still have 2 first-round picks in 2026, for example, right? They've got holes to fill, right? They've obviously gotten this defense a lot better, but they still need long-term another edge rusher, need some defensive back, primarily safety help, depending on how the cornerback position looks the second half of the season. So they've got holes to fill. They're not there yet. I think we all understand that, right? I think every single Cowboys fan isn't looking at this trade and being like, or the two trades yesterday, and saying this team is now complete. No, this is a team heading in the right direction. We've added all-pro talent. We've added a stopgap veteran, grown-up linebacker who, listen, Logan Wilson, I talked about this yesterday. I think at this point in his career, he's like a C minus kind of player. Maybe he could play better in Dallas, but the reality is he's C minus, which means he's probably better than Kenneth Murray, if we're being totally honest, which is an upgrade. And that is the key takeaway here. You should always be looking to upgrade your roster by adding great players. The Micah Parsons trade was disappointing because you obviously lose a great player for sure, but you have to get great players in return. I am not a big fan, and people are just giving the Jets just a massive amount of flowers for adding a bunch of first-round picks. They say, oh, the 2027 draft is going to be fantastic, right? You never know. Right, I remember, what draft was it where they had all those quarterbacks? Was it the 2021 draft? I think it was 2021, maybe 2021, where they had all those quarterbacks go in the first round. Right, Mac Jones, yikes. Trey Lance, yikes. Justin Fields, yikes. Zach Wilson, yikes. Trevor Lawrence. We'll have to wait and see. Right, you never know. Right, you never know who. That was supposed to be a great quarterback draft. That was supposed to be one of the greatest drafts of all time. Right, and so far it's been a dud, to be totally honest. And I think just because some analyst thinks, oh, it's going to be a good draft, it doesn't mean that you're going to, as a team, draft well and that the players are going to turn out to be good. And, that's one of the things I encourage people to avoid, that, oh, it's a good year versus a bad year. You have no earthly idea, right? You have no earthly idea, because you have somebody sit there and say, oh my goodness, these 10 great players will be available. That's awesome. Do you, if let's say there's 10 great players, do you have all 10 top 10 picks? Is that who you got? Oh, no, you're going to have your top 10 pick and maybe a top 15 pick and maybe a top 30 pick. You're going to sit there and say, okay, we're going to get one of those great players, and then you're back in the mud with everybody else. Right? It's one of those things that don't fall for the trap of, oh, you need a million draft picks, right? Now, that being said, there's nothing wrong with getting draft capital, but it's a tool to be used, right? Bill Belichick famously referred to draft picks as a passport. It allows you to go wherever you want to go. And that's what the Cowboys, with cap flexibility and the draft picks from the Micah Parsons trade, got, and that's what they used, right? They sat there and said, we wanted Quinnen Williams. They reportedly wanted him going back to end of training camp last offseason, right, when they were trying to make the deal or trade away Micah Parsons. The Jets weren't interested then. They got Quinnen Williams now. Great player. He's a great player. He's a Pro Bowl, all-pro player, for sure. Right? Anyone right now is like, I don't know about Quinnen Williams. It's because it's a defensive tackle, right? That's what it is, right? It's not a position that draws, a lot of, media eyeballs. People aren't going to look at it and go, oh my goodness, this is a position we got to watch, right? Micah Parsons, edge rusher, move him around a lot, right? He's a guy that gets a lot of glamour, gets a lot of attention. He's a great player. Quinnen Williams, I don't think he's as good as Micah Parsons on just a raw basis, right? He's not paid as much, so it makes sense. But I do think he's an all-pro player. And I do think he's a great addition to this Cowboys team. And again, look at the trade right here. If you're just going to honestly evaluate what Jerry Jones did, this is A+ work, right? This is A+ work from Jerry Jones in the Cowboys front office. Stephen Jones, Will McClay, too, across the board. All right, this next report here, I'm going to get into the media reaction, some of the media reaction to the Cowboys trade, because I thought it was hilarious. So this guy, Seth Walder, I guess he works for ESPN. He's a writer, does trade evaluations, I guess. I don't know. He's not a smart person. His writing isn't that great. I don't understand how people like him have jobs at ESPN. Anyway, he said, my grades and analysis are up for the Quinnen Williams deal, a horrific trade for the Cowboys. And so I responded, because I read his report, like, oh, maybe he's got some insights. And the reality is his grading of the trade is hilariously stupid, right? He admits Williams is a very good player. He says that, very good player, and he'll help Dallas for sure. And he also admits he's under contract through 2027, so it's not like it's a short-term rental. But he basically said because Dallas is a bad team, now it's an F. That was his argument. That was his primary argument. Listen, the Cowboys are 3-5-1. They're a bad team. They're not a playoff team, right? I think I'd agree with that statement. I don't think they're a playoff team. I think most people would sit there and say, yeah, especially in this year's NFC, not a playoff team. Too many holes to fill still. But the reality is that doesn't change the fact that Quinnen Williams makes his team better this year, 2026, and 2027. Those are all facts, right? Everything's a fact there. But because Dallas is 3-5-1 now, they shouldn't have made a trade. Think about that for a second. By his logic, no team that's not an immediate championship contender should ever make a trade to improve their roster, which is beyond idiotic, right? There are no teams in the NFL that ever win without making moves to improve their roster, adding veteran talent, right? You need a mix. You need a mix of draft picks and young guys, but you need to bring in veterans, right? If you rely just on rookie draft picks, you will never be a good football team. There's a reason you need a mix of veterans and rookies, right? You can't just be all rookies. You can't just be all veterans, right? You need a mix. You need quality, veteran, talented Pro Bowl studs and some key role players that are veterans as well, plus a mix of rookie talent to kind of plug the gaps and be the future of your team. Everyone understands this. This is obvious day one stuff, except obviously Seth Walder. And the point I make here, it's a contradictory argument that has no basis in logic. It's perfect for ESPN. But he makes one other point that I didn't mention on this post that I didn't want to mention here on the show, but I think it's just so hilariously described in his report here that I just want to talk about it briefly just because it's so dumb. I just feel like it has to be explained or tried to explain it, even though it's hard to. He literally comes out and says, listen, Quinnen Williams, good player, but here's the problem, guys. He may eventually decline. Think about that for a second. That's one of his big negatives for Dallas in this trade. He's a very good player, but he's 27. There's going to be a time where maybe he's not going to be as good. I mean, think about that logic for a second. You should never make any trade. You should never draft a player. You should never sign a player. You should never even play the game. You should just quit. After all, you make it worse. Players may get older. I mean, this is the logic that is being used by people that work for ABC, Disney, ESPN, the biggest, most powerful sports network in history. Seth Walder. I don't know who this guy is. I've actually never heard of him until I saw his article, and there was a lot of people. I saw people in the comments section of the video talking about ESPN's reporting. I said, I'll check it out, see what they say. Maybe they got something smart. Maybe they know something I don't, right? I reserve judgment. That I read the report, I'm like, this guy's argument is not based in logic. It's not based in fact. He basically admits Williams is a very good player who's under contract for multiple years, but the Cowboys, because they aren't good this year and because there's a chance, a 100% chance, that Quinnen Williams will eventually get worse as a player, as every single player does, then it was a bad trade, right? The first round pick and the second round pick Dallas gave up for Quinnen Williams. I got news for you, Seth Walder. Eventually those guys are going to decline, right? I mean, come on. Do people not understand life? Do people not understand reality? And the reality is they don't. And that's one of my takeaways here when it comes to the media. And I've got another report here I'm going to take down in a little bit. But these guys don't live in reality. They don't. They live in a world where they just don't understand how things work. They don't understand how business works. They are low-level journalists who have a lot of attention because they're prompted up by their network. Again, no one had heard of Seth Walder. He didn't build anything himself. He doesn't say anything smart. He doesn't say anything intelligent. He's basically an instrument of the power of Disney. And then ESPN, of course, is under Disney. Seth Walder by himself, if he starts a podcast or a YouTube show or writes his own column on Substack, will anyone listen? Probably not. Because he doesn't have anything smart to say. He doesn't have any intelligence. I can tell you right now, guys, every single one of you in the comment section, and I'm not blowing smoke, right? I'm being honest here. You have more intelligent commentary, negatively and positively, than Seth Walder. I mean, this guy is just... Again, he's propped up by ESPN. So don't ever let anyone tell you that you don't have valid thoughts, valid research, valid ideas and comments, right? It's total bullcrap, right? I read what you guys write every day. And again, I'm not blowing smoke, but I see stuff like this analysis, and I'm like, this guy doesn't know anything. His logic is contradictory. It's foolish. It's all over the place. He is just a creation of ESPN. He is nothing without the network. You guys have much more insightful thoughts than he does. All right, this next post here is from Nick Harris at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. He writes, after today's trades, these are the Cowboys' 2026 draft picks, their own first-round pick, Green Bay's first-round pick, their own fourth and fifth, and the seventh-round pick via the Chiefs. They are also projected to get a fifth compensatory pick for cornerback Jordan Lewis, which again also speaks to people who rely on compensatory picks, something to hold off on a little bit too much, to expect too much out of that. I mean, obviously, there's a formula that goes into it. It's additions and subtractions, so there's a lot of things. But the reality is, I mean, of all the losses the Cowboys had in free agency last year, when you look at the players that left and went on to other teams, have started and got some decent-sized money, Jordan Lewis being one of the big ones, to only get a fifth out of all that, it just speaks to how the compensatory formula really doesn't help you out too much unless you lose your starting quarterback in free agency, right? It's not a vehicle to rely on to get a lot of draft capital. People talk about it and value it way much more than they should. But when you look at the Cowboys picks, listen, they still have the flexibility, right? I mean, I think their plan, I would guess at this point, to really project out in the future is probably to get a defensive playmaker, either a Kyle Hamilton type safety or an edge rusher, top edge rusher available with their first round pick, and then listen to options to trade back from their Green Bay Packers first round pick to pick up, maybe a second or third and maybe some extra capital the following year, and then shore up the roster more from there. That's probably their plan, unless there's someone that falls right into a lap with their first pick, and then the fourth and fifth round pick probably feels like to me. If they don't get extra draft capital, probably feels like offensive line depth, maybe running back depth, things like that. Again, just trying to fill out the rest of the roster. But again, the Cowboys, they have optionality in front of them still. I talked about cap space in front of them. They have a lot of great opportunity there to, again, keep their core in place, keep Pickens, and obviously have some cap space there to make some moves outside of that. But they also, with 2 number ones, I mean, they've got a passport here to move up and down the draft as much as their heart pleases, to acquire more picks. If they like both guys in the first round, they can get them there. I mean, they've got a path forward, guys, and it's one of those things where this is really good front office execution. Because it's one thing to go hyper aggressive, right? Like the Colts and the Packers have been, right, with getting players. The Colts with Gardner, the Packers, of course, with Parsons. They don't have a lot of optionality. They're kind of stuck, salary cap wise and with draft capital. The Dallas Cowboys still have a lot of optionality, despite adding an All-Pro player in Quinnen Williams, adding solid player Kenny Clark, and of course Logan Wilson. And I think, again, that's a good place to be in, especially considering the Cowboys are not quite a good football team yet, to put it like that. All right, this is courtesy of the Underdog NFL account. Dak Prescott and the Cowboys trade for Quinnen Williams. I'm effing pumped. You can quote me on that. This is sort of a second-order effect of a trade, right? Because one of the things you want to do with your star players on your team and the talented players on your team is you want them to know that you will go out and make the team better. You will make the moves to add stars. And players look for that, right? Honestly, it's one of those things I think that hurt Jerry Jones in the past and how they managed the front office, Stephen Jones, Will McClay as well, where they were so, focused on just retaining their guys for so many years and minor deals in the offseason and things like that, where I think there's a chance that some of the veterans, some of the good players the Cowboys had, they're like, listen, the front office, I mean, they're not going to help me out. They're not going to add extra pieces to help me get a championship or win more games or just build a better team, right? Just a guy that wants to win. Does the front office really want to win, right? When players, Prescott, Lamb, other guys, Pickens potentially, Oso Odigizua, they see things like this, young guys like Ezeraku, right? DeMarvin Overshown, they see things like this and like, okay, this is an organization that wants to win. Maybe I take a little bit of a pay cut, or maybe I don't ask for everything when it comes to contract negotiations, because I understand they'll go out and get a Quinnen Williams. One of the things that I think hurt Dallas when it came to the Prescott negotiations and the CeeDee Lamb negotiations, and in some ways to the Micah Parsons negotiations, was that the player, really the player's agent in some of those cases, was like, listen, there's no proof that if I take a team-friendly deal, you're going to use that cap space to add more players, to add great players. Well, now we've got proof. All right, we've got some cap space. We've got some optionality with the Micah Parsons. Look at this. We added Quinnen Williams, an all-pro stud defensive tackle. We added a linebacker to help shore up there. And we've got cap space and opportunities in front of us going forward if we restructure Prescott's contract. So again, this is a message to the veterans on the Cowboys right now and guys who are potentially going to be entering contract negotiations in the next year or two and say, listen, if you take a 95% deal instead of a 100% deal, or try and go for 105% of your value, we can use that cap space to make moves to get better players. And in prior years, the Cowboys players and the agents would have been like, I don't believe you because you haven't done that yet. Now they have, and I think it's a really good sign going forward. This is, again, why the Quinnen Williams trade is so important, because it's not just getting a great player, and that's obviously the most important element at an area of need, the side of ball in need. It's the fact that you send a message to the rest of the players and the rest of the organization, the rest of the coaching staff that says, listen, we're going to make moves. If we make a move to open up cap space to get capital, we're not just going to sit on it. We're going to make moves to make our team better by adding great players, and that's what the Cowboys did. Really good job here. We're going to see some second-order effects because of it. All right, this next post is sort of some news courtesy of Patrick Walker. Malik Davis was waived by the Cowboys to make room for the incoming trades of Logan Wilson and Quinnen Williams. I suspect they'd like him to clear waivers and rejoin the practice squad. That seems, in all likelihood, it was one of those things that was sort of announced. I think Adam Schefter had a post on X. The Cowboys waived Malik Davis in the midst of all this, and a lot of people were like, well, what's going on there? He actually played, was active Monday night. Was it just a one-time trial and they're done with him? No, it's just one of those things you have to do with the roster, right? You want to open up the roster spot, put him back on the practice squad, elevate him or not over the course of the season. It's just a funky roster game. Teams have got to play, right? So Don't take too much stock into this. It's just, again, bottom part of the roster, special teams guys, backups. They're going to get, we saw this with Zion Childress, right? We've seen this with a bunch of players. You get waived, you get put on the practice squad, you get elevated. They got to do that dance. It's the life of being the bottom 5 or 6 players on the 53. And a guy like Malik Davis, of course, is used to it at this point. All right. And, another me talking about the media not being very smart. So this is courtesy of, I guess, Danny Parkins, who I've never heard of. I mean, a lot of these talking heads commentators, I just, maybe it's because I'm out of the loop. I guess I feel like I'm pretty in the loop. I've never even heard of these guys. And now I'm supposed to take them as experts who know what they're talking about. But anyway, this is on Fox. So again, I trashed Disney and ABC and ESPN. So let's get the other big network in there. This is on Fox Sports, FS1. Parkins thinks the Cowboys trade was motivated by Jerry Jones wanting the media to talk about them. Accept what you are in the moment. This is a middling team at best, so to give up significant future capital for the guy to join the 11th seed doesn't make sense. Okay, so again, this is obviously, Parkins is obviously not very smart, obviously, right? Because Quinnen Williams is under contract through 2027. At least Seth Walder, who had a silly illogical argument, at least acknowledged that fact. This guy right here, who looks like, the last time he played sports was, never, if we're being honest. He just doesn't even understand what the goal here was for Dallas, was to build a defensive line for multiple seasons, right? Just like Kenny Clark was not a 2025 only trade when they added him from the Micah Parsons deal. Just like, hey, extending Oso Odigizua, giving him a contract, wasn't a deal just for 2025. Obviously, these are obvious things. This is day one stuff. I mean, I don't understand how people can be this naive, be this stupid, be this foolish. I don't understand it, and how you have a gig on TV. I just don't get it. But let's put that aside, right? Okay, maybe you just aren't paying attention. Okay, fine. Was motivated by Jerry Jones wanting the media to talk about them. So let me get this straight. And I responded to this again on this channel's X account, SMI Cowboy Show. Jerry Jones, who with all that draft capital, with all the players he could have traded for, and all the positions he could have gone after, decided to trade for a position to get a 300-pound defensive lineman in one of the least glamorous positions in all of sports, coming from a team that's been losing so long, no one even knows who Quinnen Williams is outside of really good NFL fans, right? It's not a household name, right? There's not a lot of people outside of people that really follow football that know who Quinnen Williams is. And Jerry Jones, because he wanted attention, he wanted people to talk about Dallas, that's who he traded for. Really? Really? You think Jerry Jones, who knows how to get attention, he's added TO. He's traded for wide receivers in the middle of the season, not once, but twice. In terms of big name guys, Roy Williams and then Amari Cooper, right? He's made massive deals, headline grabbing moves. He's done it all the time. For God's sakes, he traded for George Pickens this calendar year. He knows how to get attention, right? He fired the greatest coach, one of the greatest coaches in NFL history, for my money, the greatest one in Tom Landry, right? He knows how to get attention. You better believe he knows how to do it. And if he wants attention, he will get it. This was not a move for attention. This was not a move to get people talking about Dallas. Because guess what? Outside of today and tomorrow or whatever, a couple days, no one's going to talk about Quinnen Williams because it's not a sexy story. He's a defensive tackle. He could be a first-team All-Pro player. He's a great player for sure. But no one's going to talk about him because he's a defensive tackle, right? It's one of those things. It's one of the least glamorous positions, and maybe the least glamorous position in the entire NFL outside of maybe guard, right? At least center snaps the ball and left tackle, and the tackles in general get a lot of hype because they're blocking great pass rushers generally. You've got an ugly position, doesn't get a lot of attention, nasty football, physical football inside. To say this was a move for attention to get people talking about him, it's bonkers if that's your world. And I think what people are, to be totally honest, is they live in this framing of being a Cowboys hater. I call it the Cowboys hater industrial complex for a reason, where they just have to look at every move Dallas does, everything Dallas does, and it's always terrible. It's always bad. You have to destroy it. You have to eviscerate it. And like I've talked about this before, it's out of envy. It's out of jealousy. Danny Parkins is, listen, I'm sure he's a nice guy, right? I'm sure his kids love him and his wife loves him and all that kind of stuff, right? But the reality is he's a nobody, right? Listen, I'm saying this as a guy who's pretty much a nobody myself. I understand I'm not like, I'm not anything close to being an impact guy in terms of this media space. I get it. But the reality is this is a guy here I don't go on TV or I don't go on YouTube, I guess in this case, and sit here and talk about how much, a a team's move is just to get attention without knowing the move. I don't come into a discussion completely and totally ill-informed about the situation and the context like this guy is. I mean, this is just embarrassing stuff. And this is who Fox and Disney, ESPN, are throwing out there in the public view. And they wonder why they're hemorrhaging viewers. They wonder why people are tuning into YouTube and podcasts across the world and in every landscape, sports, news, business, politics, you name it, right? Because of garbage like this. And they don't understand it. And they keep trying out guys like this. And I don't know why we keep losing viewers. Guys, because you have guys that come on TV that don't know what they're talking about, who have nothing of value to add, who are just frankly wrong. Or guys who write columns that use logic that's hilariously idiotic, right? This is the sports media landscape from a big guy perspective, the Fox Sports and the ESPN world, right? And again, they've got resources, they've got the money, they've got the power for sure, right? And they can stay afloat, they can do their thing for a long time. But the reality is there's a reason these guys get mocked. There's a reason, people look at Danny Parkins and they say, who? And this is exactly why. Because your analysis, Seth Walder, your analysis, Danny Parkins, it's a combination of stupid, wrong, and ill-informed. And it's hard to be all those. It's hard to be those three things all at once. And both of these guys managed to do it. All right, that's my media take of the day. I was very surprised at the number of people that looked at the Cowboys trade. And there's some other people that actually, there's a lot of other people I saw too that were, I pulled up the comments. I'll get to them in a second. But that were just like, I don't understand this trade. The Cowboys are bad this year. So if you're a bad team, you should never trade for good players that are under contract for multiple seasons, right? That logic is idiotic. And it speaks to why, by the way, people are not in front offices. That is something to understand and consider, right? There's a reason I'm on YouTube, right? There's a reason these guys some of these talking heads are wherever they are and not running NFL teams. Is because NFL teams, front offices, executives, right? They actually understand the process. Doesn't mean they're perfect at it, of course. But you have these guys that go on TV or go on whatever their platform is and say, I don't understand this trade. The Cowboys are bad this year. And they got a great player for multiple years. That should be enough. But you don't understand. You don't understand at all. That was a first-round pick they gave up. That could have been a great player. And they would have had him for multiple years. So they basically traded a chance, really two chances, to get a great player for multiple years. And they got a great player for multiple years. In his prime. He's 27. At an area of need, defensive side of the football, right? I feel like it's so easy to explain, but people just don't get it. And I think it's an intelligence thing. I really do. I think it's a combination of hating the Cowboys, and I think it's just intelligence. And again, I don't want to blow smoke up you guys too much because I feel like a lot of you guys are like, Nick, you're just trying to lather it on thick here. But I read what you guys write, and I'll get to that in a second. And it's so much more intelligent than what I read on commentary online. And it blows my mind how people get paid so much money, or theoretically get paid so much money to put this stuff out there, right? They basically are getting paid this amount of money because they can put on a suit and go on live TV and don't accidentally drop F-bombs. I think that's really what it is, right? I think they're just safe picks for the networks. They put these guys on TV and they're not going to, do something crazy or wacky or have a meltdown or something. That's basically what they're paying for. And that's the reason they're struggling. All right, let's get into the comments. Enough about that. A lot of comments to get to today, of course. So going to run through a lot of these. All right, this first one is from our members. Our first member, Plague Doctor here. Love our members. Again, you guys are smart. That's why I hype up you guys and you have really good insights. Plague Doctor writes, I'm kind of struggling with the Williams trade to understand what we're going for on defense. Unless you're converting to Osa to end or running a 5-2, I don't know how you arrange the front seven. See the first report, right? They're going to be using a lot more odd man front going forward, so that may answer your question right there. We don't have backers for a 3-4. We have undersized playmakers rather than big mauling guys who can stuff gaps. Quinton Williams is great, but let's not get ahead of ourselves and say he brings 90% of what Micah does, which it's rich to me, Jerry complaining about him again when he stops landing helicopters on the practice field. I'll take him seriously regarding reverence for the game. But back to my point, no one is game playing against Quinton Williams the same way as they do Micah. The 12-sack year was monstrous, but he's not hit double digits since. You have to figure this out because you can't play three defensive tackles making $20 million plus per year as rotational guys. I understand this concern, but like I said, they're transitioning more to an odd front, right? They're going to play that a lot more. So think about it like this. Suddenly you play an odd front 20% of the time. That's all three guys on the field, right? And even Micah Parsons. Do you know what percentage of snaps Micah Parsons played when he was on the Dallas Cowboys? I think he maxed out about 68, I think something like that, 67%. Now that's a lot of snaps, and he's a great player, of course. But that's, again, that means there's 30 plus snaps a game on defense that count where Micah Parsons wasn't on the field. And it's the same way with other positions on the defensive line, right? There's going to be a lot of times where, if it was just Osa or Kenny Clark, as we've seen, they're not on the field. There's a lot of times Ezra Roku's a great young player. He's not on the field. So just because, you have 3 defensive tackles, how do you get them all on the field? Well, you do an odd front 25% of the time. Let's say I'm making up the number here. And then now you have the other 3 guys rotate in the standard even 4-3 fronts over the course of the game. And it evens up to end up being probably about 65% per player by the time you go through all the numbers, right? In terms of number of snaps. And that's about what you get from Micah Parsons on a game-by-game basis. It's one of those things, defensive linemen never play 100% of the snaps, never even remotely close. It's one of the few positions that doesn't, right? And I think that's important to remember. Now, when it comes to the bringing 90% of what Micah does, I think people don't understand how flawed Parsons is as a player, and he's a great player. But let's be totally honest here, right? Like, he's not Lawrence Taylor. He's Khalil Mack, right? He's not one of the great defensive players of all time. He's a really good defender. He was solid, but far from spectacular against the run. For sure. He was a guy that, to be totally honest, because of his size, doesn't get a lot of calls, doesn't get the holding calls. I think a lot of it is his style of play. In big moments against big tackles, big good players, he kind of disappears, if we're being totally honest again. Right? And he's a great player, nothing against Micah Parsons at all. But the reality is people put Parsons on this pedestal. And listen, I saw Parsons' defense in 2024 get eviscerated. I saw Parsons' defense in 2023 against good teams, Buffalo, San Francisco, Green Bay in the postseason, get absolutely humiliated. Right. So again, I don't want to. I'm tired of this Parsons commentary as if he was like this. And I'm not saying you're doing this at all. I'm just saying you listen to people again in the media, or you listen to, some people on social media, and they're like, Parsons is the greatest player of all time. He's not even the best in his position in the NFL. Garrett is clearly better than Parsons as a pass rusher by itself. When you factor in run defense, it isn't even close. I would argue Max Crosby as a complete player is better than Micah Parsons, and Parsons is great. First team All-Pro kind of guy, defensive player of the year kind of guy, for sure, undeniably so. But let's dial it back a little bit here, right? People treat Micah Parsons as if he's Aaron Darnold in terms of his dominance. Not even close, not even the same sphere, right? And I think Quinnen Williams was probably 85%, 90% of Aaron Darnold, right? Quinnen Williams is a good player, is a Pro Bowl player, All-Pro player. And he's 80, 90% of Aaron Donald, and Donald was much more impactful and better player than Parsons. So it adds up, right? Now, listen, I'm not saying Quinnen Williams is going to go out there and be, Aaron Donald. I don't think he's going to be. I think he's going to be a good player. He's a really good player. It's a good addition. But let's dial back the Parsons sort of putting on a pedestal here. I mean, this is a guy that didn't have a single pressure against the Carolina Panthers, no impact whatsoever. He does have these games where he just disappears. We've seen it in Dallas, where it's just like the great Micah Parsons, the unstoppable machine that he is on some plays, some games, and then other games he just disappears. Where is Micah Parsons even playing? Listen, he's Khalil Mack. He's not Lawrence Taylor. And I think that's important to remember. All right, David Dobbins, 5887 writes, Quinnen is a big addition. He will eat blockers, instantly clean the lines, that makes your linebackers better. Your linebackers upgraded with Wilson and Overshown already, so you're double dipping there. Wilson is also an upgrade on pass coverage as the secondary gets some help. Williams and Overshown improve the pass rush, which helps the secondary, a secondary that is getting upgrades via Revel, Carson, and Butler. Next game defense will look way different. We'll learn to move on without Mozzie somehow. Obviously, a little tongue-in-cheek there. Yeah, and that's one of the important elements of a defensive tackle, or really any defensive player that can play the run and be a pass rusher as well, right? And that's sort of the one negative with Osa Odighizuwa, who's a much more pass rushing guy. Against the run, he's much more of a playmaker. Like, listen, I'll blow up a play every once in a while, but on a down-by-down basis, he's not the best in terms of run defense. It helps everybody out, and that's why having a balanced team, and it goes back to the Micah Parsons argument, right? You have one great pass rusher who's phenomenal in Parsons for sure, but the reality is if it takes away from other positions on your team, and if you go that great one-trick pony I always talk about the Cowboys had under Dan Quinn, you don't have enough guys that can stop the run. Your linebackers are put in bad position. Now your secondary, if you don't get that pass rush, is in a bad position, and it really snowballs from there. And we saw it with the talent on the field for Dallas this season. Without that awesome pass rush, suddenly you're starting to look around. And we saw this last season too in some cases when Parsons was hurt. You're like, oh my goodness, the linebacker play isn't there because they don't have good defensive line play to protect them. And because they don't have good defensive line play to protect them, the linebackers are getting killed. Because the linebackers are killed in the run game, they can't get back in the pass game. So the safeties and corners don't have help from the linebackers, who also now don't have help from the pass rush. It becomes just a snowball effect. Defense is about team, each person contributing and helping out and working together. Quinnen Williams is a great team defender, right, at the defensive tackle position that can help out the secondary with his pass rush, can help out fellow pass rushers, can help out the linebackers. Again, it's why it's such a good addition, because it helps out every element of this team. Other than if they had gotten the pure pass rusher, for example, it wouldn't have had the same effect, right? Because if they wouldn't, it would just replace James Houston's role, which nothing against James Houston. But the reality is you need a team defender if you want to play team defense. That's why Chris Jones in Kansas City is so impactful, by the way, because it's run defense, it's eating up blockers, it's pass rush, it's everything, guys. You have to be able to do everything, and that's what Williams can do, and that's why it's a good pickup. Bubba Baker 6244 writes, great deal. That should slow down the run until they run up the edge. I'll take the start of the fix. Yeah, it is a start, right? And I think that's important to understand, and I've highlighted this a few times. Long way to go to fix a defense, right? Listen, Overshown upgrade, Wilson upgrade, but the reality is they still have huge flaws. Huge flaws. Secondary has issues for sure. Safety position has issues for sure. Long-term linebacker, we'll have to see how good Overshown is in terms of health. Now, listen, things could work out great, right? There is a world, a universe where Revel looks like a good starter. Overshown looks back to form. Wilson steps up and he's a C player. He's a stabilizing influence. I'm not expecting Wilson to be a star, just be, competent. And then suddenly you look around, you're like, okay, then the Cowboys need to go out and maybe get another young safety or two. And you look at the cornerback room with Deron Bland, Reddy Stewart. You look at, Savon Revel, and you sit there and say, okay, Kalen Carson as a backup, Butler as a backup. You start looking around and be like, I can live with this, right now. And I think that's what could happen pretty easily. Now, that relies on a lot going well. Of course, Revel could not play well. Overshown could take more time to recover, right? Wilson could stink in Dallas, which makes things a little more challenging. But the reality is it's a step in the right direction. That is undeniable. There's more work to do, which is why they have the cap flexibility and the 2 first-round picks to make those additional changes. Chris Oldham writes, restructure Dak's contract to free up the cap dollars to afford keeping Pickens, Osa, and Clark. Yeah, I agree with you. That's what I mentioned in the opening. Good point. All right, Chris Oldham also writes, double dip, 50% on trade predictions. No to sneaky trade for Brooks, but yes to dream trade for Williams. Yeah, you called it, man. I give you credit there. The defensive rebuild has truly begun. We won't be a bottom-feeding defense soon, but too many holes still exist to make the season a winner. The last half of the season will definitely be entertaining. And this is exactly why I talk about you guys in the comment section being smarter than 99% of people that talk for a living on sports. Exactly, Chris. Exactly. Freaking exactly, right? The defense got better. The season isn't a winner. We all know that. It's year one of Shawnee. It's year one of Eberflus, right? It's, there's going to be a lot of changes. It's going to be a tough year. They've had a bunch of injuries like a lot of teams have had to deal with. They're not a great football team. The NFC is deep. It's not their year, guys. It isn't. We all understand that. But they're better, and they're going to be better for the future years. They now know going into the offseason, okay, defensive line, really good, -1 edge rusher. We got 2 first-round picks to get it done. Wilson, is he the stabilizing influence next to Overshown? We will see. Good chance he could be. Again, we're not looking for him to be a star. Just be, better than Kenneth Murray. Be competent, right? That's all they're looking for there. And then you have young linebackers like Leah Fallon, Shamar James in certain packages, and we'll talk more about that this week. So again, you're not getting rid of those guys, but you're putting them strictly in positions to take care of their specific skill sets, put them in positions to be successful. Again, entertaining, still very flawed for sure, but it's a step in the right direction, and that's why it should be celebrated. All right, let's get into some of the comments from the game itself. This is from David Dobbins, 5887. 6 turnovers. The defense still managed to keep them at 27 points, had stops, had sacks. Flusum had them in the right defense again, and too many times the players blew it again. If we had signed Pickens like everyone wanted, we could have spent $150 million for 7 whole points, 7 turnovers. Yet some more cast-offs is a great idea. Like, comment, subscribe, hype. I don't know where you're getting 6 and 7 from. Obviously, you have the 2 4th downs and the three turnovers there. Although that last interception, it's 4th and 26. You're down by 10 with a minute to go, right? Throw it up. It's what you got to do. Since then, Logan Wilson and Quinnen Williams. Plus, we're early in the week while having our bye week. That means next game we could have Wilson and Williams, Overshown and Revel. Oh, and the intriguing Butler and Carson. Things might look different. Yeah, it'll take time to integrate all these new pieces for sure. but the defensive rebuild is well on its way, and the big moves were made that need to be made, and I think that's good to see. Fix 50-10 rates over 10 seasons. Dak hasn't been able to get us to a conference championship game and is yet the highest paid player in the league. Benefits of perks of being a Cowboy, right? However, it is truly time to consider investing, slash drafting a new franchise quarterback next year in contention with the final year of Dak's contract. We all know Dak won't get paid more if he's unable to get us to an NFC championship game by the end of his contract. I believe he continues to trend downward in value. Why not give Shotty a new QB, fresh defense, and revive this franchise team? Of course, Jerry doesn't like risk and change to the extent we need and want to see, so I expect to continue to see the team slowly adjusted around Dak's ability, but I just don't believe Dak is that guy anymore. Prove me wrong. Well, I mean, listen, I understand the concern and sentiment, and they did trade for Joe Milton, by the way. He's a developmental guy. So don't sleep on that, right? Milton is, again, in year 2, right? There's a world where there's sort of a Tony Romo effect that could happen. I'm not saying this will, or I'm not saying there's a good chance of it happening, but Milton's in year 2, and obviously you could have a 5th-year option. But remember, Romo was at nothing in 03, right? In 04, nothing. And then in 2005, some rumblings started to emerge, right? And then in 2006, he had that great preseason. But even then, people who weren't in the know were like, Drew Bledsoe and Romo's, he's the backup. And before long, it's like, what the heck is it? Who is this guy? Right? And again, 03 was his rookie year. It wasn't until his 4th year that he really emerged, 4th year with Dallas, right? 4th year with the same head coach, Bill Parcells. So again, we look at Joe Milton, and I'm not saying he can follow that path, but they have their developmental guy right now in Milton. And listen, he's gotten some reps in the preseason. Shawnee gave him a ton of reps, right? It's clear they like him and want him to get him some opportunities, right? And I think, I'm not against Dak per se, but you always got to be looking at that quarterback position. And Milton, to me, is the developmental guy. He's got physical tools on the level, and in some cases ahead of the star quarterbacks in the NFL. So in terms of a developmental future franchise guy, number 10 may be the guy. Just something to keep an eye on, for the future. Chris Oldham, again, this is commenting on the trade. First trade, 7th-round pick for Logan Wilson for the Bengals. Upgrade over Murray, very low bar, easy contract to walk away from if he's not a piece for the future. Linebackers versus Raiders will be Wilson and Agent Zero, both returning from injuries. Upgrade. Well, certainly is an upgrade because of the linebacker position, if we're being totally honest this season. And listen, you guys can crap on me for this. I've been hyping up Shamar James, and I think he had a solid game against the Jets and a good game, not a spectacular game, but a good game against Washington. Very bad day against Carolina. Dreadful day against Denver, and then a disaster game against Arizona. So, obviously 3 total duds in 5 games. Not a good sign for Shamar James. I think he can do some things as a blitzer and some third down packages. He's an athletic guy. He can play in space. I just think as an every down first and second down linebacker, certainly against the run, he has struggled mightily. So Wilson is certainly an upgrade with Overshown over him and Murray. Murray, again, he's I'm not trying to be mean here, but he's just been a D+ player at best. So if the Cowboys just get C minus from Wilson, it replaces Kenneth Murray, and it is an upgrade. All right, this next comment is from It's Juma 3231. Writing this while listening, but from last night, talking about Monday night, Bland had a stinker, but can't be mad after he played a month of good football. Kenny Clark had a solid game after a lot of criticism this past week. Clowney and Yezi played solid. I can't help but feel bad for Flus. I don't care if he stays or goes, but you watch him call man and they get beat. They call prevent on 3rd and long, and the players still leave holes at the sticks. The offense was poor, and I think we need to stop being cute in the red zone. We start the game with Williams gashing the defense for 5 yards per carry, and then we run the ball one time inside the 5. The 4th down calls were what everyone was screaming for last week, so we can't be mad. We have to score the TDs, and they haven't been. That's a great point. People were looking at the 4th down calls and were like, was that the right move? When they were faced with similar situations against Denver and decided not to go for it, right? And remember, they went for it on 4th down, at least once by my memory, and I think actually twice against Carolina, very similar game, and they got 1 conversion by penalty and 1 conversion for a touchdown. So again, it's one of those things where you understand why Shawnee went for it. And I think it was the right move in both cases, right? And they just didn't execute. And I think Prescott taking that sack, in the pass protection, I think that late high throw to CeeDee Lamb, that was a poor read, poor decision there from either Lamb or Prescott or both. Prescott did not play his best game by far. It wasn't all his fault, of course, but, I don't think it was a great performance by anyone offensively, although I thought, for the most part, Pickens and CeeDee Lamb, again, as a duo, are very productive. Listen, I agree with your comment on Flus.
They went into the game basically saying, we're going to play a lot of coverages where Deron Bland's going to be on Marvin Harrison Jr., and we like that matchup. And Deron Bland had the worst game of his career by far. But he's played such a good month of football. He really has. He was their only competent defender against Denver and had a great game against Washington, solid against Carolina, very good against the Jets, right? It's one of those things where he had a really good month of football, especially working his way back from injury. And listen, duds are going to happen, right? They really are. And that's why defensive talent at multiple levels is important, because if you just have a bunch of draft picks and you throw a bunch of rookies out there, right? Deron Bland, like, okay, we're playing a lot of rookies. All right, Deron Bland, you have to be perfect every week, right? It's tough, right? While you wait for the rookies to develop. With some veteran studs, maybe make things easier, right? The linebacker play gets better, like we talked about, and the coverage underneath gets better. So Deron Bland, maybe if he gets beat on a deep in breaking route, maybe a guy like Logan Wilson drops into coverage and obfuscates the view and the quarterback doesn't hit him, right? It's one of those things, right? These things play on each other when you play defense. Team things matter. And Deron Bland, who had a great month, but a really awful performance Monday night, yeah, I agree with you there. I think the running the football in the red zone, I get it to a certain point, but remember, they had first and goal, I think, that opening drive at the 6, and then they ran it and lost 4 yards, right? So it's one of those things where the Cowboys offensive line, my coaches when I played offensive line in college, they said, listen, if you want to run the ball in the red zone, you got to earn it. When we run the ball, we can't get negative plays. And I think the Cowboys offensive line, and maybe it was the call, maybe it was a good play by the defense. I think he went unblocked, right? So I would think someone made a mental mistake, I would guess. You need to execute, right? If we want to run the football in the red zone, you need to execute. And the offensive line didn't execute, or the running back didn't execute, or it was a bad play call, or whatever it was. And I think that's a big part of it, right? And I think offensive coaches correctly understand, listen, running the football in the red zone is very, very difficult. It's hard to do as you get closer if you're down to the 6 or 7, right? You've got to, when we run the football, take advantage of it. They did on the opening drive, and they lost 3 yards on first and goal from the 5 or 6, right? Can't happen, guys. And listen, you got to take advantage of those opportunities. All right, next comment. Listen, there's a few more to get through here. I know we're already pretty long of a show, but I want to get through a lot of these because I think the trade deadline stuff is pretty cool. Styles 1169, finding a team that would take Mozzie is a win in and of itself. Yeah, I think for both parties, both for Dallas and for Mozzie Smith, for sure. Roger Everhart 2882 writes, is Williams better than Jalen Carter? I think they're different players. I think Jalen Carter is bigger and stronger, more powerful, but Williams is much more athletic, so it's sort of just different players. I think if you're looking to run more of an odd front and be a little more versatile with some of your defensive line, do that 5-man front like I talked about before, I think Williams is a much better fit for that because he can slide all along the defensive line, do a lot of slanting and things like that. The real Daryl 282, the Jets are another franchise that always has talent and let it go to waste. Yeah, people forget the Jets had like 3 first-round picks, I think in 2020 or 2021, and I think they had 2 first-round picks in 2020 as well. I mean, they've had picks for days before, and they got a lot of good players. I mean, the team is talented. Garner, Wilson, Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald. You look at Quinnen Williams, right? I mean, Breece Hall. I mean, they've got players. I mean, legitimately, they've got players, right? Their young tackle, Minbell, is a really good player, right? Elijah Very Tucker was a good guard, right? They've got good players. But the Jets, for whatever, just can't execute, just can't figure it out. Coaching, quarterback, it really matters. All right, this next comment is from Rich B3U. LOL, Mr. Save the Draft Picks is on board. What? Yeah, I mean, listen, I was all about holding the draft picks, but it's key to get great players. I didn't think there would be a great player available. I would be worried they would trade a first and a second for, I don't know, Jalen Phillips or something like that for Miami. No, Quinnen Williams is a Pro Bowl player. He's proven it, track record, good addition. You add Pro Bowl players, add star players. That's what it's all about, right? You take that risk when it's a player, when it's a good player, out of an area of need. GKM5, thank you. We needed your logic and all the insanity out there with the trades. Like I said, I appreciate the comments, so you're certainly welcome, and thank you for commenting. Andrew Campakos writes, this helps with Eberflus' scheme, but they need to continue with Schottenheimer's adjustments. The 5-1 lineup seems to work well at the line, but the corners have to play better and not allow a 3rd and 23 to be converted. Yeah, third down defense was atrocious. Secondary is still a problem. That's undeniable. And that's one of the things. This is a step in the right direction, but this is a multi-year process to get this defense fixed. Northern Cowboy 8409 writes, completely agree that it would have been a bad had we traded for a 1-year rental. That it would have been bad had we traded for a 1-year rental. The season is going nowhere. We still need something at offensive tackle and DB. I'm happy both trades today, given 2.5 years of control. No need to get a DT early in this upcoming draft. If Overshown can stay healthy, we have a solid base for a linebacker core. Yeah, it's one of those things where you added an all-pro talent, Pro Bowl player in Quinnen Williams. if Overshown is healthy and Wilson can be just competent, you've gone from a bad linebacker core, one of the worst in football, to a very solid linebacker core overnight. And that's what you should do, right? You don't wait for March or April to okay, let's look at our team. Let's see how we can be better. You should always be looking to improve your team. They did it with Jadeveon Clowney. They did it at the trade deadline. If you wait until everybody else, in March, April, free agency, draft time how can we get better? You're late. You always should be looking to improve your team while not mortgaging your future. That's what the Dallas Cowboys did here. GKM5 writes, thank you. We needed your logic and all the insanity out there with the trades. Okay, I guess that comment was a duplicate somehow. YouTube will do that sometimes. They'll throw double comments. The same person, they'll put it twice. I don't know why YouTube does that, but they do sometimes. Kind of a software bug on their end. Kevin McDonald 6979 writes, love the palate cleanser. It is a trademark catchphrase. Yeah, it's one of those things. It's what they say, they can't choose your nickname. So kind of quick funny story to end on. My dad was in the Air Force, and he was when he had a call sign. His call sign was Wall Street, right? I think if it's something like that, I think it was Wall Street. It was at the time when the movie was out and things like that. But the reason he got that call sign was because he recommended a stock tip, like, hey guys, this company's going to blow up, and it went bankrupt. It went to zero. And so they chose the name for him, kind of making fun of him by saying Wall Street. Yeah, hey, Wall Street over here. Like the one stock he picked went to total zero. Great job. This guy's an idiot, right? Again, you don't choose your nickname in a lot of cases, and I didn't really think palate cleanser would be a trademark, but it has become that. And listen, I'm here for it. If it becomes something you guys like and becomes a little trademark, when it's all said and done, you can't choose it. And if you guys love it, I love it too. So good to see that there. All right. A lot of comments, a lot of stuff to get through today. Of course, a lot of stuff to talk about over the bye week. Listen, we're talking a multi-year process here, but you have to get good players, right? You have to get multiple good players. That's what the Cowboys did. They've turned Micah Parsons at this point into Kenny Clark, Quinnen Williams, and a first-round pick. That's a good, solid player, a Pro Bowl player, and a good chance at a solid player. One player, Micah Parsons, into three good, solid players on average, right? That's winning football. That's what you needed to do. That was the goal of the Parsons trade. They're enacting that plan, and I am here for it 100%. I think the media reaction is silly, nonsensical, illogical, and based in envy of the Dallas Cowboys. But the reality is this was a good trade. This was a good winning day for Dallas just based on the paper, right? We have to see how they perform on the field. We have to see how the defense uses them. Of course, all of that matters. That's the most important thing. But the way things sit today and the moves they made from a strategic perspective, A-plus work by the Cowboys front office. Again, no one-year rentals. Again, not mortgaging the future. They still have cap space. They still have the flexibility. They still have the first-round pick. And areas of need, they got it done. Linebacker, defensive line, great to see from the Cowboys here. Being aggressive. And again, second-order effects. The veterans and other guys on this team, they see the Dallas Cowboys making moves. And they're like, okay, this front office means business. They're going to spend the money. They're going to spend the draft picks to get us good players today. And I think there's going to be a lot of positive effects long-term when it comes to negotiations and things like that because of it. But listen, obviously a lot to talk about over the course of the bye week and going forward for the Cowboys. And I will be here tomorrow and every day to break it down for you guys. But until then, I am Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.